Something I think about a lot as an actor, as an artist, as a person who makes media, is how we see ourselves as human beings. And currently it seems like we're at a stage in the evolution of humanity that we don't seem to have a lot of faith in our capacity. I mean, I think it has to do with this very simple question that seems to be such a potent one right now, is like, is there a God? You know? Is there a purpose to life? What are we doing here? I mean, even science, even though these are metaphysical questions and philosophical questions, it seems to me that the prescient thinkers and the greatest scientists are thinking about these same questions and trying to answer them too. And I would love to see children and youth encouraged to pray and sing more. That's it, actually. If we could all be praying and singing a lot more, I just think we'd be starting at a baseline that's far more positive, that gives us such a higher ceiling of ability and opportunity. Hi, my name is Pen Badgley. I'm an actor. I'm living in Los Angeles now shooting a television show, but I ordinarily live in New York City in Brooklyn.
I couldn't look you in the eye.
Will Bettelheim.
Your credit came back sparkling, Will. But I looked you up. You're not on the socials. Thought you might be some kind of freak.
It makes me cry.
I was born in 1986 in Baltimore, Maryland. I have a half-sister who is 17 years older than me. Her name is Jenny. So we didn't grow up together. We grew up as two only children. We share a father. I lived until I was about 8 years old, I think, on the East Coast, at which point we picked up and left for the Northwest, just across the country. I started to do community theater as a social outlet, but also, I mean, I was very attracted to music always. Performing, singing, dancing. I was doing already like voiceover work. I worked at a radio station, like a kid's radio station when I was about 9 years old. I made $5 an hour. It was fun, you know, storytelling and stuff and doing news segments. I was the voice of video game characters for Nintendo 64. And so by the time I was 12, I moved to Los Angeles with my mom and started working as an actor. My mom has always been, I mean, to say she's encouraging is an understatement. She's believed in me probably to a fault, you know? It's like near delusion. Because I mean, the thing is like to make it as an actor it's an unrealistic goal. And yet she saw in me something that I don't know anyone else did. And even if I saw it in myself, I mean, she helped me to realize it. Past a certain age, past 12 years old, I really didn't have a conventional schooling, like an academic track record. And I'd already skipped a grade before that, and I started a year early, so I was always quite young in my class and a bit of an outsider. But you know, somehow she just really instilled in me, I think, just like I said, the thirst for knowledge, this fire to read, to learn, to know, to see the world as a boundless place for learning and engagement. I was around other kids and youth who were doing what I did. That's good and bad, you know. Again, a strange industry to be working in at such a young age, the entertainment industry. Well, I always was thinking that I would go into film school. So I was getting credits for that, to transfer to USC as a film student. So I just basically took as few classes as possible to get like the basic general education, and then I would take all the arts. You know, I would take I really enjoyed English lit because I was reading Shakespeare. I think I was like 14 or so then. I loved drawing and painting. So actually for me it was really stimulating. I loved it. No one ever questioned the fact that I was young. It was just like, yeah, we're all here learning. You know, it's much more stimulating than the experience I had. I did go to high school for like 3 weeks before technically dropping out because I was working, but far more stimulating than the experience I had there. There were times where like money would be tight and I would have to really question what I was doing. By the time I was 19 years old, for instance, I was considering getting a job as a waiter or a delivery person, and then Gossip Girl came along and I actually turned it down. And I was like, no, I can't do more television shows like that. And then a month and a half later they came back and wrote me an impassioned letter, and that was when I'd say the wave that I'm currently on sort of began, really. Because at that point I was questioning whether or not I wanted to continue acting. I wanted to be a musician, and I wanted to explore art in a more integral and pure way than I felt I'd been able to. Because the irony is that actually I never had the experience as a teenager or even a child of like just doing whatever you want. I was professional at such a young age that I didn't have, as creative as I was, and as much as I didn't feel like there were limitations on my creative expression, at the same time I was not just doing all the crazy, silly stuff that a teenager might do. All of the questions that had arisen in my late teenage years, which led me to also, like, say, for instance, question whether or not I should do a show like Gossip Girl. All of those questions were for a time put to the side necessarily as I worked, and was working quite a lot. And then again, by the time I was about 23, 24, I was asking those questions again. And they wouldn't go away. They were persistent. There was a fire in my chest and a sort of storm in my brain, and I was pretty deeply troubled, actually, by a lot of the experiences I was having at the apex of, you know, what we call fame. It's hard to orient yourself around anything other than yourself in that position, especially as a man, especially as a white man. When you're on set, people actually really prefer that you don't do things for yourself, like get a water, move your own chair. You know, it's very simple things like that. But then you extrapolate that to a lifetime of someone in that position, and you can become so accustomed to people doing a lot of things for you, so that you're able to do your job, which is arguably important, but it shouldn't be that much more important than anyone else's job. It shouldn't be any more important than anyone else's job. And yet I was having these experiences that by every other measure should equal happiness or contentment or excitement or something. But I wasn't feeling any of those things. I wasn't able to behave in the way that people expected when it came to substance and sexuality and all of these things, which are really, you know, they're present forces. I was just confused as to why I was so unhappy, although not that confused, because I knew that these things shouldn't matter, but they were powerful forces in my life, and I felt alien. But also being mindful of the fact that there's a certain kind of privilege and access that I was being given, and so I think I used it. I think I took it as an opportunity to travel the world, and I ended up in Colombia, in the rainforest in Colombia, staying with an indigenous tribe, and I met a Baha'i. I met a Baha'i there. I had read a book as a late teen, early 20s called Breaking Open the Head by Daniel Pinchbeck, who I came to see as a great thinker and modern philosopher, and then I ended up meeting him. I met him at a bar in New York City. He was talking to a friend of mine, and I immediately recognized him. So I went up to him and I said, I don't want to disturb you, but your book really helped transform some ideas in my mind and has had a profound influence on my life. But again, I don't want to take up your time. Have a good night, It was really that brief. Especially because I knew what it was like when people came up to me, and I just wanted to respect his time and his space. And so like 10 minutes later, he came up and he was like, "What do you mean?" And he invited me on this retreat where he was going to go stay with this tribe. And this was like this sort of thing that I'd read about in his books and had been reading about in a lot of other books and people's travels and metaphysical pursuits. And so there was something about mysticism that I was trying to understand, and spirituality that I was trying to understand. How does a modern person connect with these ancient traditions? Like, so meditation, like what is that, and how do I connect that to like social justice? These were questions that were arising. And when I was participating in these ceremonies with the Kogi tribe, and then somewhere along the way, my Baha'i friend, we were having more and more meaningful conversations. I think I was going through a really heart-wrenching breakup, and he offered me The Hidden Words by Baha'u'llah, and I read a passage from that. And I wept openly, and I finally asked him, like, what is this? Can you tell me what this is finally, please? His conduct was progressing and evolving and changing over the years too, and I think I recognized that in him. And he would host devotional gatherings, and I would come, and we would pray and meditate and stuff. I still didn't really give it much thought for another year. I traveled, toured as a musician. I made a record and was touring with my band. But I was reading Rumi at the time, so I was reading a lot of Rumi.
I think that maybe if I can't explain the in-between, this and that other dimension, and maybe on another plane we never really met.
And so I feel in a way that Rumi's language was a bridge to Baha'u'llah's word for me. And so by the time 2015 came around, I think I was consciously investigating the Baha'i writings, thinking about their implications, and reading messages from the Universal House of Justice for about 6 months to a year, consciously investigating, before I decided that I think if I was serious about, as I probably would have said then, changing the world, now I would probably say like contributing to the betterment of the world. Then I think I need to be Baha'i. That was, I remember it was like a very intellectual decision at that point, because mystically I was having just a love affair with Baha'u'llah and his writings. I was at that time not working during the early months of that year, and the fast happened, so I fasted. I fasted for 19 days with the Baha'i friends I had, and I was meditating for hours on the Hidden Words at this point, reading the book front to back like on a daily basis. It was this deeply personal, mystical pursuit that finally wedded with the call to service that the Universal House of Justice, in fact, in their 1986 letter to the peoples of the world, the promise of world peace, it was that document that really got me thinking intellectually about participating in the betterment of the world, contributing to the betterment of the world, how that's possible, how that's not only possible but inevitable, and how it might come to be depending on how we behave. So then, whatever that was, 2015, yeah, like mid 2015, then I declare it as a Baha'i. A few months prior, that same friend who had introduced me to the Baha'i writings, he invited me to participate in the Institute process, the Ruhi Institute process. Again, I didn't know it was called that at the time. He was like, hey, you want to go up to the mountains with me and like study some mystical writings? I was like, yeah. And he, his wife, and a few other friends, we went to his house in the woods and we engaged in the Institute process. And again, I didn't know what to expect at the time. But I went home from that intensive study thinking about prayer and service, thinking about the life of the soul, thinking about life after death, and how this is relevant to social justice. And once I engaged in the Institute process, which again, I think as well as I can recollect, I just thought it was, as I saw it, it was friends gathering to think about how spiritual well-being of an individual can contribute to the spiritual well-being of a community and thus the material well-being of a community. Starting to connect those dots, I was inspired. I kept engaging in the community building activities with the Baha'is in New York City. I heard about these things called junior youth spiritual empowerment programs, and I heard about children's classes. And I just kept thinking, like, these Baha'is are so oriented towards serving, towards bettering their communities. You know, so many organizations and groups end up asking for money at some point, you know. Never did that come up. Never. Everything about what we call the Baha'i faith, and yet we, even as Baha'is, can't claim to understand perfectly, right? Like, everything about it just continually then and now revealed itself to be of great integrity. I don't remember exactly. I was a bit nervous to tell my parents because they were not fond of religion. It was much harder to tell my father. I think initially it was confusion. Like, religion? Really? You've turned to religion. Of all things, the clear source of evil, you've turned to religion. You know? And I'm like, yeah, I know, it's crazy. That's not how we define religion, you know, at all. And so that conversation is ongoing. Literally, right now. And that's, you know, the conversation I'm having with all of my friends. Even my agents and my managers, you know, they probably, I think if there's ever a question like, what has this young actor done now? Has he gone and found religion, and has he made a mistake? You know, I'm sure people have that. So that conversation with all people is ongoing. I think as Baha'is, that's what we're learning to do. We're learning to redefine religion for ourselves, and as the community grows, it is for others, you know. The things in your past don't matter, for if you search with your heart, the answer will come to you like a breeze.